Today, I want to talk about training mistakes that beginners make and 5 big ones and how you can avoid them. The first one I want to mention, and what immediately comes to my mind, is form. I think when you start a training program, the first thing you have to do is you have to learn proper form. And as you look across social media, you'll see all kinds of weird exercise variations that aren't meant to be done that way, where people are going to potentially hurt themselves, and particularly with basic movements. Basic movements done with improper form can be very dangerous. So proper form would be the number one tip I can give you as a beginner. I say as a beginner, but we've all seen a lot of intermediate and advanced people use terrible form as well. So make sure your form is in check. So my best advice for you in learning form is to understand some basic kinesiology. So you'll have to do a little bit of reading, you'll have to do a little bit of studying. When I first started training as a young teenager, I always went to the kinesiology section in Muscle and Fitness, and I learned, for example, what the origin and insertion of muscles were, what the muscles actually did, and that's really what you want to understand. Like you want to understand, like for your shoulder, for example, like the side of your shoulder. Well, what does that muscle actually do? Does it raise your arm this way? Does it raise it this way? Does it pull it across? You need to understand those things. So just basic muscle function, you really should understand that stuff. It's really hard to use proper form on all these different exercises if you don't understand. So getting that education really is the foundation, and I would encourage everybody to start there. The second tip I have for you, or the biggest mistake people make, is they don't track their progress as a beginner. Now, this is critical. And when you start training, you should get stronger. Even if your muscles don't get bigger, you should get stronger and pretty quickly. That's just from your nervous system getting better. Your brain and your spinal cord talk to your muscles better. They learn how to fire. They learn how to work together. So you get these neural improvements in strength, we'll call it. So the best way to do this is with a logbook. So write down, on this week on squats, I did 3 sets of 8 with 185 pounds. The next week, hopefully it's 195 pounds or 190 or 200 or whatever it is. But using a logbook will tell you if you're headed in the right direction. As a beginner, if you're not getting stronger, there's something wrong. You know, it could be your nutrition, it could be your rest, it could be an injury, it could be a lot of things. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if you're a beginner and you're not getting stronger, there's something wrong. And the best way that you can tell that is, again, just track what you're doing. Look at your logbook every week and see where you're at. Tip number 3 is to make sure you master basic movements. I'm talking about squats, pressing, whether it be bench presses, overhead presses, incline presses, chin-ups, rows, deadlifts, all those very basic exercises. Those exercises will give you a lot of bang for your buck. You'll be able to work a lot of muscle groups at once. You're not necessarily interested in isolating your muscle as a beginner. You want all your muscles to work together. So when you do a squat, you're not thinking, oh, I'm just working my quads. You're thinking, I'm going to get some quads, I'm going to get some adductors, I'm going to get some glutes. Depending on my stance, I may even get a little tiny bit of hamstring. When you're doing a pressing exercise, you're not going to think, oh, I'm going to isolate my chest. You're going to think, hey, let's get my chest, my shoulders, my triceps all at once, get them all working together. So really master those basic movements, those compound movements. Those are going to be kind of the foundation for your house. And if you're not good at those, you're probably going to struggle. I will say this, as you advance into intermediate and advanced stages, you may find that some of those exercises aren't the best for you. But I still think it's always great to start with all those exercises when you are new to this and you're trying to build some strength, trying to build some muscle. So make sure that you don't get enamored by all the stuff you're watching on Instagram and all the crazy fancy cable movements that look a little weird. And make sure you're getting 70-80% of your work is those really good basic compound movements. Number 4. Speaking of those fancy movements you see on Instagram, you need to do isolation movements too. You don't want isolation movements to dominate your program, but isolation movements do 3 things I really like. Number one, they put you in a position to really get that mind-muscle connection. So for example, if you're doing a machine fly for your chest, you're sitting there, it's really easy for you to learn how to isolate, get your mind connected to your chest doing this, as opposed to doing a heavy bench press. So an isolation movement will really allow you to learn that mind-muscle connection. That mind-muscle connection is going to become more and more important as you advance through these stages of training. The other thing it allows you to do is feel tension in the muscle. Sometimes you just feel like you're moving a weight from point A to point B, but to get the most muscle gains, you want to really be able to generate a lot of tension. That tension is going to equal overload, and that's going to equal muscle growth. So again, to use our example of that fly, where we're using a machine to do this, you can actually feel the muscle flexing and contracting, and that's a good thing. You want that. You're not necessarily going to get that with compound movements to the same degree, and that's okay. But they really, really allow you to generate tension in your muscles. And when it comes to building muscle, as you get more and more educated in this, you're going to understand that tension is the name of the game. The other thing that they allow you to do is just to develop a more complete physique. If you don't do leg curls, you're not going to have the best hamstrings you can have. If you don't do rear delt flies, you're not going to have the best rear delts you can have. If you don't do hammer curls, you're not going to have the best arms you can have because you want to have the brachialis development. So there's an aesthetic portion of this too, where you want to keep a nice balanced physique. You can do all the deadlifts you want, but there's a lot of other movements that are required for your back to develop to its fullest. So it also helps you develop a more complete physique by learning how to do some more isolation movements. So again, point number 3, do compound movements, the majority of your program. But point number 2, do not skip isolation movements. And I see a lot of people saying you should never do isolation movements as a beginner, and I 100% disagree with that. So make sure you're incorporating isolation movements as well to generate your mind-muscle connection, to feel tension, and to develop your physique completely. And tip number 5. People oftentimes use a logbook, they make great progress, and if they have a workout where they don't go up in weight, they assume that workout was a waste of time and it was a failure. That is not true. So the 5th key is just a simple understanding in your mind that your weight is not always going to go up. Every single time you go to the gym, your weight's not going to keep going up. If you have a week where it doesn't go up, that's okay. As long as you're working hard, just stay at it and realize that your workout wasn't a failure. Sometimes the greatest thing that a beginner can learn is that in order to get to their best potential, they have to be very patient. They have to be very consistent. So don't get frustrated if you have a workout. You know, I've seen a lot of people go, well, I wasn't getting any stronger, so I just quit doing exercise A or exercise B. Well, you'll see through the course of your training journey that there'll be peaks and valleys, or maybe not valleys, but there'll be peaks where you're getting stronger, then you'll maintain, then you have another peak. And then as you get more advanced, you'll realize that those peaks come less and less often. So it gets harder and harder and harder to continue to get stronger and stronger. So just mentally, don't let it beat you down if you have a week where you don't get stronger. Okay, so those are 5 tips. I think if you really take those to heart as a beginner, and a lot of those tips apply to intermediates and advanced as well. Sometimes as an advanced lifter, we forget about the basics and we do too much isolation stuff. Or we do the opposite. We just get in our mind that we're going to do all the basics, forget the isolation stuff. We end up hurting ourselves. We end up getting injured because that's not a good solution either. So I'm saying these are good tips for beginners, but you could probably apply some of this to intermediates and advanced trainees as well.